I spent 40 years of my life delivering other women's babies. 40 years, in the same hospital, on the same maternity ward, in a town in southeastern Ohio, you have most likely never driven through. If you put a number to it, and nurses do put numbers to things, it is how we keep the days from blurring together. I was in the room for somewhere close to 3,000 first cries. 3,000 times I watched a mother hear that sound and come apart with relief. I can tell you almost any number you want about my working life. But there is one number I have never had, and it is the only one that ever truly mattered to me. I do not know what my own daughter's first cry sounded like. I was in the room. I gave birth to her on a June morning in 1985. But I had asked them, beforehand, in writing, to take her out before I could hear her, because I already knew, the way you know a true thing in your body long before your mind agrees to it, that if I heard that sound, I would not be able to do what I had come to that room to do. So they were kind, and they were quick, and they took her. And for the next 40 years, that silence was the loudest thing I owned. My name is Diane. I am 63 years old. I retired last spring, after 4 decades on the ward, and I live by myself now in the same small house on the edge of Marietta, Ohio, that my husband and I bought when we were young. His name was Tom. He has been gone 5 years. We had no children together. I will come back to that, because it is part of this. And so the house is very quiet now. And I have had, this past year, a great deal of time to sit inside that quiet and think about the morning in 1985. I was 21 years old that morning. I want to be careful telling you how I came to be there, because it would be easy to tell it in a way that makes me only a victim, and just as easy to tell it in a way that makes me only a fool. And the truth, like most truths, is standing somewhere in between those two, with its hands in its pockets. I was 21, halfway through nursing school, and I was not married. The young man, his name does not matter much to this story, because he did not stay in it long, not then and not after, was 22 and frightened. And when he was frightened, he did what frightened young men so often did in those years, which was to become very busy and then very far away. So it was me. It was me, and a pregnancy, and a nursing program I could not afford to lose, and no money of my own, and a town where in 1985, an unmarried pregnant girl was still a kind of weather that everyone around her felt entitled to comment on. And it was my parents, my mother especially. I am not going to call my mother a cruel woman, because she was not one. She was a frightened woman of her own particular generation, and she loved me in the anxious, managing way that such women loved. But she sat me down at the kitchen table, and she laid it out for me the way you lay out a hand of cards you have already decided is a losing one. There was a home, a few hours away, where a girl could go. There was an agency. There were couples, good couples, church-going, with money and a yard and 2 of everything, who could not have what I had accidentally been given, and who would give that child every single thing that I, at 21, with empty hands, could not. I want to tell you that I fought. The honest thing is that I did not fight very hard, and the reason I did not fight very hard is the same reason this has sat on top of me for 40 years. Because part of me, a real part, not only the part my mother was pushing, looked at my actual situation, my empty hands, and my unfinished schooling, and the young man already halfway gone, and that part of me agreed with her. That part of me believed, truly believed, that the most loving thing I could possibly do for my daughter was to hand her to people whose hands were not empty. I have spent 40 years unable to decide whether that was the bravest thing I ever did or the very worst, and I have come to think that the not deciding is simply the price, and that I will go on paying it until I die. The adoption was what they called closed. I need to explain what that word meant in 1985 for anyone too young to have ever brushed up against it, because the word does not carry its full weight on its own. Closed meant sealed. It meant that on the day I signed the papers, a door was shut that everyone involved promised me could never be opened again. I would not be told the couple's names. I would not be told where they lived, or what they did, or what they would call her. I would not be sent a photograph at 1 year, or at 5, or ever. The file would close, and the law would hold it closed. And I was asked to understand that this was a kindness, that a clean, complete separation was better for the child, better for the new family, and, they implied, better for me. Because how could a girl ever move forward with her life if a window kept being left open behind her? I was 21. I signed. I have thought a great deal, in the years since, about how much a 21-year-old can really be said to consent to. I do not raise that to excuse myself. I raise it because I have delivered the babies of a great many frightened 21-year-olds since, and I have never once looked at one of them and seen a person fully equipped to sign away the next 40 years of her own heart. But the law allowed me to, and so I did. She was born early on a June morning. The labor was long, and I went through most of it alone. My mother was in the building, but it was not the kind of thing, in our family, that you did together. And near the end, when the nurses could see that it was close, one of them, an older woman, leaned down close to my ear. She asked me, very gently, if I was sure. About the arrangement, about not holding her, about the room. And I said yes. I said, take her. I said it before I could hear anything, because I had spent 8 months building a single thin wall inside myself, and I knew that this wall had been built to survive exactly one thing, which was not seeing her and not hearing her. If I held her, the wall came down. If I heard that cry, the wall came down. So they were gentle and they were fast, and there was a great deal of motion at the foot of the bed. And then there was a sound. I heard the very start of a sound, and then a door, and then the sound was on the other side of that door, and then it was gone. That is the whole of my memory of my daughter. The first half-second of a cry, cut off by a closing door. They let me rest. And the next day, my mother drove me home, and somewhere on that drive, she said the sentence that I believe she genuinely thought was a comfort. She said, "Now you can put this behind you, Diane," as though it were a town we were driving out of, as though behind you were a real direction a person could send a thing and have it stay sent. It did not stay behind me. It got into the car. It has been in every car I have ridden in for 40 years. I finished nursing school. I want you to take note of that, because for a long time I could not. Finishing felt like a thing I had no right to. But I finished, and I did well, and within a few years I had taken a job on the maternity ward of our county hospital. And I have had people, the few who ever knew my history, ask me over the years how on earth I could choose that, how I could spend my entire working life in the exact room where the thing had happened to me. I have a true answer now, though it took me decades to find it. I did not choose that ward in spite of my daughter. I chose it because of her. I think some buried part of me had decided that if I could not be in a delivery room for her, then I would be in a delivery room for everyone else's, that I would spend 40 years making sure other mothers got the morning that I had not let myself have. Every time I laid a slick, furious, brand new baby onto a weeping woman's chest, I was, in some small and private way, doing for a stranger the one thing I had not been able to do for my own child. It did not heal it, I want to be honest about that, but it gave the wound somewhere useful to point. I married Tom when I was 30. He was a good man, which is an unremarkable thing to say, and the highest praise I have to give. I told him about the baby early, because I had decided I would never again allow a wall to stand between me and someone I loved, and he listened to the whole of it, and then he held me, and he never once, in 28 years of marriage, made me feel that I had handed him damaged goods. June was always a hard month for me, and Tom learned that without my ever having to teach him twice. He never asked me to be cheerful in June. We tried, Tom and I, to have children of our own. For a long time, and then with doctors. And then quietly, we stopped trying and did not discuss it much. It is one of the harder ironies of my life, and I have stopped searching it for a meaning, because I do not believe it has one. The single child my body ever carried, I gave away. And then it never carried another. I made my peace with that the slow way. Tom and I had a good marriage and a quiet house, and I had 3,000 other people's babies, and for long stretches that was enough, or near enough, that I did not let myself check. I should tell you what I did every single June for 40 years. On the morning of her birthday, and I knew the date was the one fact the closed file had not been able to take from me. I would get up before Tom, and I would make a single cup of coffee, and I would sit with it at the kitchen window and do the arithmetic. She is 4 today. She is 11. She is 25. Perhaps she is married. She is 33. Perhaps there are children of her own now. I would build her a whole life in my head, 1 year older each June, and I would sit with that imagined woman for the length of 1 cup of coffee, and then I would rinse the cup and set it in the rack and go to work. Tom never knew about the coffee. It was the one piece of her that I kept entirely to myself. 40 cups, 40 imagined women, and not one of them, it would turn out, was anywhere close to right. I did look for her. I want you to know that. In the early 1990s, the laws began, very slowly, to soften, and registries began to appear. Places where a birth mother and an adopted child could each file their name, so that if both of them ever went looking, the two threads could be tied together. I filed mine the same week I heard such a thing existed. I filed it, and I checked it, and I checked it, and for 30 years it sat there and nothing ever touched it. Every few years I would write a letter into the silence of the agency and receive back a polite paragraph that told me nothing at all. I came to know the shape of that disappointment so well that eventually I stopped reaching for it, the way you finally stop testing a stair you already know is rotten. Tom died 5 years ago, and somewhere in the long, flat quiet that came after, I made a kind of peace, a thin one, with the likeliest version of the rest of my life. I was going to grow old in this house. I was going to retire from the ward. And I was, in all probability, going to die without ever knowing my daughter's name, or whether she had been happy, or whether she ever, on a June day, thought of the woman who had carried her. I did not like that future, but I had stopped fighting it. There is a kind of surrender that looks, from the outside, almost exactly like peace. And then I retired. And in the strange, unstructured spring that followed, the first spring of my life with nothing I was required to do, I did the one thing I had spent 30 years being too afraid to do. I bought a DNA test. You know the ones. A small box, a tube. You mail your sample away to a laboratory, and some weeks later, a website shows you a map of where your ancestors are supposed to have come from. Most people buy them for that map. For the percentages, the old countries, the tidy pie chart of yourself. I did not care about the map. I do not think I had ever cared less about anything in my life than I cared about which corner of Europe my great-grandparents had sailed out of. I bought it for the other thing those tests can do. The thing they tend to mention more quietly. Because when your sample goes into that laboratory, it is not only measured against a map, it is measured against every other person who has ever mailed in a tube, and the website will tell you, if it finds them, about your relatives, your cousins, your matches. And, if such a person happens to exist in that database, and if the science says so plainly enough that there is no room left for any mistake, it will tell you about your child. I almost did not send it. I want to be truthful about that. The little box sat on my kitchen counter for 9 days, because for 40 years, not knowing had at least allowed me to hope. As long as the file stayed sealed, my daughter could still be anything. She could be happy. She could be alive. She could somewhere be loved. The moment I put that tube in the mail, I was choosing instead to find out. And finding out meant the hope might not survive the answer. The test could tell me she had searched and given up. It could tell me she had searched and found me and looked away. It could, worst of all, tell me nothing at all, forever, which is its own particular kind of answer. On the 10th day, I drove to the post office, and I mailed it before I could change my mind. And then, I did the thing I had become very good at over 40 years. I waited, and I told myself nothing would come of it. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember that it was raining, the gentle kind, and that I had been doing something entirely unremarkable. I believe I was looking for a recipe when the laptop made the small sound it makes when an email arrives. The email was from the testing company. The subject line was 4 words. You have a match. I want to slow down here, because the next part happened very fast, and I have spent a year slowing it back down so that I could survive remembering it. I opened the email. There was a paragraph of cheerful, careful language, the kind a company writes when it knows its small sound has just walked into the middle of someone's whole life. And then there was a link, and I sat at my kitchen table, 63 years old, with my finger above that link, and I did not click it for a long time. Long enough that the rain outside changed. Then I clicked it. The website opened to a page, and at the very top of that page was a heading, and the heading did not say cousin, and it did not say aunt, and it did not say any of the soft, distant words that 30 years of registry checking had taught me to expect. It used a different word. It used the word that the science reaches for when the two samples share one full half of everything, when there is no statistical room left for doubt and none for hope to get its fingers into either. It said parent/child, and beneath it was a name, a real name, a grown woman's name, a first name, and a last name. And beside the name there was a number, and the number was her age, and the number was 40. And beside that, and this is the part where, sitting at my own kitchen table, I finally made the sound I had not let myself make in that delivery room 40 years before. Beside that was a small round photograph. A face, a woman's face, 40 years old, looking out of my own laptop screen at me on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I did not recognize her. I want to be honest about that, because the films will tell you that a mother always knows, and I did not know. How could I have, when all I had ever been handed was half a second of a sound? But I sat there and I looked at that small round photograph, and I found my own mother's chin resting on a stranger's face. I found something around the eyes that I had last seen in my own bathroom mirror as a young woman. The recognition did not arrive all at once, and it did not come from memory. It assembled itself piece by piece, the way a face surfaces slowly up out of deep water. There was more on the page. There was a short note, the kind the website allows a member to leave for whoever might one day come looking for them. It was not long. She had written it, I would later learn, 11 years earlier. She had taken her own test more than a decade before I took mine, and her small note had been sitting in that database the entire time. A candle left burning in a window, waiting for someone to finally walk up the road. I'm not going to give you her note word for word, but I will tell you that it said she had been adopted in Ohio in 1985, that it said she was not angry, and that it said, in the very plainest language a person can use, that if anyone on the other side of her beginning ever wished to be found, she had spent a long time hoping, and she was here, and the door on her side had never once been locked. Her name was Lauren. I did not write to her that Tuesday. I know that some of you will not understand that. 40 years of waiting, the road finally open, and I closed the laptop and did not write a word for 2 more days, but I had learned something on the ward about thresholds, about the held breath in the very last moment before a thing arrives, and I knew that whatever I sent her would be the first thing I had ever in my life given my daughter, and I was not going to give it to her carelessly. The first gift had been a closed door. I wanted the second one to be the opposite of that in every possible way. So I waited 2 days, and I wrote it out longhand first, many times over, and then I typed the one version that was true and not too heavy a thing to hand a stranger, and I sent it. I told her my name. I told her that I was the woman she had been looking for. I told her that she had not been given away because she was not wanted, that she had, in fact, been given away because of how unbearably much she was wanted, by a frightened 21-year-old with empty hands who had been convinced that love and surrender were, in her particular case, the same single act. I told her that I had carried her every day for 40 years, and I told her that her door had not been the only one left unlocked, that I had filed my own name into every registry I could find, that I had been reaching back toward her for decades, and that the two of us had simply been calling into the same canyon at slightly different times. She wrote back within the hour. I have kept that first reply. I have it printed out and folded in the drawer of my nightstand, and there are nights I still take it out. It was not a long message. She did not, in it, call me anything, not my name, and certainly not the other word, the heavy one. We were both far too careful for that, so early. But she had written one sentence near the end of it that I have now read more times than I have read anything else in my life. She wrote that she had always been told by the kind people who raised her that she had been chosen, and that she had been grateful for that word her whole life, but that there had always been a second, quieter question folded up underneath it. Chosen, yes, but first she had to have been set down somewhere, by someone. And who was that someone? And had that someone ever once looked back? And now, Lauren wrote, she finally had her answer. The answer was yes. The answer, it turned out, had always been yes. We wrote for 3 weeks before we spoke, and then we spoke for a month before we met, and I am not going to lay all of that out for you, because some of it belongs only to the two of us now, and because I have learned that a story like this one is not improved by being emptied all the way out. But I will tell you the shape of what I learned in those weeks, because the shape of it matters. I had spent 40 years braced for two possible Lorens. One was a Lauren who had suffered, who had landed in a hard home, an unloving one, and whose suffering would be mine to have caused. The other was a Lauren who was angry and fully entitled to be, and who had come looking for me only in order to hand me a bill. She was neither of them, and learning that she was neither was its own complicated weather, one I had not thought to brace for, and I want to tell you about it honestly. Lauren had been loved. Her adoptive parents, a teacher and a school principal, a kind and ordinary couple from a town not 3 hours from my own, had wanted a child for a long time, and when they were given mine, they had, by every account Lauren gave me, poured 40 years of steady, unspectacular devotion into her. Her adoptive mother, a woman named Susan, had died of cancer 6 years ago. Her father was still living. Lauren had grown up climbing their trees and arguing at their dinner table and being driven to her school recitals, and she had grieved Susan the way that you grieve a real mother, because Susan had been one. That was the relief of my entire life, the thing I had prayed into the dark for 40 years. Let her be loved, let it have worked, let the terrible math of it have come out right, had come out right. My daughter had been loved, and it would be a lie of the worst kind if I told you that the relief arrived alone. It did not. Tucked just behind it, quiet and a little ashamed of itself, came something else. The plain knowledge that the life I had ached to give her, someone else had simply gotten up every morning and given. That there was a mother in this story, a good one, and that her name was Susan, and that it was not me. We met on a Saturday, in early summer, in a park halfway between her town and mine. She chose the park. She said, in the careful way that I was already learning was simply how she moved through the world, that a park was good, because if either of us needed to, we could walk. I got there early. Of course I got there early. I sat on a bench and I watched the parking lot the way I had once, 40 years before, watched a delivery room door, and at a few minutes past 10, a car pulled in, and a woman got out of it, and this time I knew her. I knew her at 100 yards. The deep water face had finished surfacing. I am not going to try to give you the first minute. I have tried to write it down for myself several times this year, and I have found that it does not survive the trip onto paper, that on paper it turns into the kind of scene you have watched in 100 films, and it was not that. It was both smaller and far, far larger than that. I will only tell you that we did not say very much, that she is tall, taller than me, and that I had to reach up, and that we stood there in a public park, two grown women, a 63-year-old and a 40-year-old, and held on to each other long past the point where strangers would have let go, while a man threw a tennis ball for his dog 40 feet away, and had no idea at all that the entire arc of someone's life was quietly completing itself on the grass behind him. We walked. We did, in the end, use the park exactly the way she had planned it. We walked for nearly 4 hours, and we sat down on benches when the walking got too heavy to do, and she asked me her questions. and I had promised myself, on the drive over, that there was not one of them I would answer with anything other than the truth. She asked the big one early. She asked why. And I told her. The kitchen table, my mother, the empty hands, the young man already leaving, the part of me that had genuinely agreed. I did not tidy it. I did not make myself braver in the telling than I had actually been on the day. I told her that I had been 21 and frightened, and that I had made a choice that was partly forced upon me and partly painfully my own, and that I had never once in 40 years been certain it was the right one. And Lauren listened to all of it, and then she said something that I will carry with me for whatever time I have left. She said that she had spent her own life with a question inside her, a small hollow place shaped like a Y, and that she had imagined, over the years, a great many possible answers to it, and that almost every answer she had imagined was colder than the one I had just given her. She said, "You have been telling me you are sorry since your very first letter, but I did not come here for an apology. I came here to find out whether I was loved on both ends of my life, and I have my answer now." She had brought a folder. Near the end of those 4 hours, on the last bench, she opened it, and she began quietly to give me back the 40 years. Photographs. A red-faced infant in a yellow blanket. And I made myself look at that one for a long time, the very first day of a life I had not been allowed to be in the room for. A gap-toothed girl on a bicycle, a teenager scowling in a prom dress, a young woman in a graduation gown, a bride. And then the last photograph. A little girl of about 10, with Lauren's exact stubborn jaw. And Lauren told me that her name was Mia, and that Mia was mine too, and that I had been, for 10 years without ever knowing it, a grandmother. I had to put the folder down on the bench. I want you to understand. I had walked into that park that morning, braced to meet one person, one. I had spent the whole drive rehearsing how to be careful with exactly one stranger's heart. And in the space of 4 hours, that one person had quietly become a whole line of people. An infant in a yellow blanket, a girl on a bicycle, a scowling teenager, a bride, and now a 10-year-old with a stubborn jaw who shared my blood and did not yet know that I existed. A family does not arrive in you gently. It arrives the way water arrives in a dry riverbed, all at once, finding every channel, and you are not ready for it, and there is nothing to be done but to let it come. Lauren watched me sit with it. She did not rush me. She had, after all, had her own 40 years of getting ready for this bench. I want to tell you the honest truth about where all of this has left me, because the honest truth is the only thing I have ever found worth telling, and because a tidy ending here would be a small betrayal of everyone who has ever lived a story like mine and not had it tied up at the end with a bow. Lauren and I are not going to get the 40 years back. There is no version of this where we do. I was not there for her first day of school. I did not teach her to drive, or sit up with her when she was 16 and heartbroken, or stand in the front row when she married. Susan did those things. Susan, whom I will now never meet, who loved my daughter through every ordinary day that I spent 3 hours away delivering strangers' babies and aching. I have had to make room inside myself for Susan. I have had to learn how to be grateful to a woman for raising my child, and to grieve, in the very same breath, that it had not been me, and to understand that those two feelings are not enemies, that they can both live in one chest without either one of them ever having to win. Lauren has a mother. That word is taken, and it is taken honorably, and I would not reach for it, even if she offered it. What Lauren and I have had to do this year is something I have come to think is actually rarer and harder than the reunion the films try to sell you. We have had to invent a relationship that does not have a name. I am not her mother. I am also not nothing. I am the woman whose body she began in, who has loved her without a single fact to love her with for 40 years, and who is now, late and clumsy and overjoyed, finally learning her. Learning that she takes her coffee black, that she is quick to laugh and slow to trust, that she hums without noticing she is doing it when she cooks. We are building the thing with no blueprint at all. Some weeks it is awkward, every week it is worth it. And I have had to do one more thing this year, the hardest one, and I am going to pass it along to you in case you should ever need it. I have had to forgive the 21-year-old. For 40 years I had kept her, that girl, in a kind of permanent custody inside me, and I had never once let her out, because letting her out had always felt like letting her off. But I have looked this year at who she actually was. 21, broke, abandoned by the boy, sat down at a table by a frightened mother, handed a losing hand, and told that it was the only hand on offer. And I have found, at 63, that I can no longer stand to be her jailer. She did a thing that broke her, because she had been thoroughly convinced that it was the most loving thing her empty hands were able to do. She was wrong, and she was also not wrong, and either way, she has now served 40 years. So I have let her go. And Lauren, when I told her that I had finally been able to do that, said it was the only sentence I had spoken all year that she had been quietly waiting to hear. June is different now. For 40 years, June was a month that I survived. A month I asked Tom not to expect me to be cheerful in. I would feel it coming the way you feel a change of weather in an old injury, and I would go quiet, and I would get through it, and I would be glad when it was finally July. This past June, Lauren and Mia drove down, and the three of us sat together in my small quiet house, the house that has not had a child's voice inside it in its entire history. And for 2 days it had one. Mia found the box of Tom's old dominoes. She is 10 years old, and she has Lauren's jaw, and Lauren swears, my own way of going perfectly still when I am thinking. And at one point, she climbed up onto the couch beside me without asking, the way a child does when she has simply decided that you are family, and I had to get up and go into the kitchen for a minute and stand by the sink. I gave a great deal of my life to a hospital ward, and I do not regret a single hour of it. 3,000 first cries. 3,000 mothers handed the morning I had not let myself have. I used to think of all that work as a kind of penance, as the long, slow bill I was paying off for the June morning in 1985. I do not think of it that way anymore. I think now that it was simply love with nowhere to land, and that love with nowhere to land does not spoil. It waits. It finds a ward, or a registry, or a small cardboard box on a kitchen counter. And it waits. Mine waited 40 years. And then a laboratory measured a tube of it against a tube of hers, and a website used the one word I had ever wanted it to use, and the door that a frightened girl had been promised could never be opened. Opened anyway. Late. Far too late for so very much of it. But not, as it turned out, too late for all of it. Not too late for a park bench and a folder full of photographs and a 10-year-old girl deciding, on a couch in June, that I counted. If you are standing on either side of a door like that one, if you are a parent who let a child go, or a child who was let go of, and you have spent your years telling yourself the door is sealed and there is no use at all in walking up the road, then this story was for you. One word in the comments, if it found you. Found. Just that. I would like to see how many of us there are out here, each of us standing at the start of our own long road, deciding whether it is finally time to walk it. Subscribe for new stories, real patterns, full narratives, the long game. 2 small pieces of wisdom from this one, before I go. The first, be very careful of the word closed. People will use it about doors, about files, about whole chapters of your life, and they will tell you that closed means sealed, means final, means you may as well stop looking. It very often does not mean those things. Laws change. Databases fill up. The world keeps quietly building new roads between people who had been told there were none. A door that one frightened generation swore could never be opened is, this year, opening for someone somewhere every single day. Do not let another person's old certainty decide, on your behalf, that the road is not even worth standing at the start of. The second, if you are carrying a younger version of yourself locked in a cell, some 21-year-old, some frightened person who once made the choice that broke you, go and take an honest look at who they actually were. Look at their real hands, and their real options, and the real table they were sat down at. You may find, as I did, that you have been keeping a prisoner who finished serving their sentence decades ago, and that the only person still locked inside that room with them is you. You are allowed to open that door too. Letting go and giving up were never the same thing. Not once. Not for a single day. I'll see you next time.